invitation to speak with you today. So as Ted mentioned, I came to Canada as a refugee with my family, and my mom is here today, who is an incredible woman, and got our family through an unimaginably difficult time. And during that time, we were the recipients of charity and assistance and support. And sometimes it felt really good, and other times it felt humiliating. And so I carry that with me, knowing that part of the reason why I'm standing in front of you today is because we were sponsored by a United Church, or a group of churches that sponsored our family to come to Canada. And really feeling that I want to be part of addressing that injustice, both here and abroad. And wanting to do it in a way that doesn't make the people that I'm working with feel the way that our family felt at times when we were the recipients of charity. And so I feel really fortunate to work with an organization called Seed Winnipeg, and it stands for Supporting Employment and Economic Development, that focuses on community economic development, particularly in inner city areas. And we run a variety of programs that are designed to support people in making their dreams a reality, in addressing and moving out of poverty through starting businesses, through saving for different assets, by acquiring skills, by acquiring grants. So their savings are matched, and through that they're able to achieve things that they wouldn't have been able to without that support. And so the community economic development and community development principles that underpin our work are very consistent with the idea of accompaniment. And so the programs are created in consultation with community members to reflect the priorities of what's important in people's lives. Half of the staff that deliver the program are former program participants, and so there isn't that us-them dichotomy. The training that we do is done based on participatory adult education principles, and so the facilitator is facilitating a mutual learning process between all of the participants in the room, and they learn more from each other, and we also learn from them as we provide in terms of the content that we have to deliver. And it's also reflected in the way that our organization operates internally. And so we use a participative management process. So I'm a manager, but I really work with staff to build our programs, to critically reflect on what we're doing. They are an integral part of the decision-making process, because I know that if it was up to me, I would probably totally screw it up. so I really rely on their wisdom and knowledge and guidance and insight. That said, there are constraints to being able to do that. We live in an imperfect world. There are power dynamics at play, and in order for us to be able to have the scale of impact that we're hoping to have, there are compromises that are made. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So we are a nonprofit charitable organization. We get funding, and along with that funding are obligations to funders that shape the way that we work, that compromise our ability to completely be consistent with those principles that I just talked about. So as an example, one of the things that we need to do is ensure that all of the people that are part of our program are below a certain income threshold, both for our funders, also to make sure that with the resources that we have, we're having the greatest impact possible, and we're reaching the people that could most benefit from the program, but also because of the Canada Revenue Agency to maintain our charitable status. So I just met with a woman today. She's an immigrant, and she was applying to our program, and again, big power differential. She's asking us to get into the program. We're not accompanying her in any sense at that point. We're deciding whether or not we're going to start that journey with her. And so she had, initially when she applied, she provided a proof of one of her children's income in order to show what her whole household income was. And unfortunately, we needed to have proof of income of everybody in the household. So later on, she had to come and bring the income proof of income of the other child. But that wasn't enough because we didn't have enough of a sense of what was happening in terms of her business. And so this afternoon she's coming again for the third time to bring us a sense of her business expenses to find out if she qualifies from the program. So just to give you an idea of the bureaucratic rigmarole that we put people through in order to meet our obligation to funders. The other tension that we have in our work is around to what extent do we work to address the damage that's done by our economic system, by the way our political system operates, in terms of the fact that there are people living in poverty that have that really could require a whole range of support. So trying to deal with the damage of the system at an individual level. And that's an imperative. It's similar to what happened with our family. We were part of that collateral damage as refugees. But behind that is a whole system that produced that in the first place. And so there's also wanting to work at more of a systemic level. What is it that's producing these refugees? What is it that's producing poverty here in Canada? Why one of the richest countries in the world? Why is it continuing to perpetuate? And so there's also an imperative to work more at a systemic level, and that's a tension. To what extent do you work with individuals? To what extent do you work at a broader level to deal with institutions and the systems, even around supporting people with building assets? We need to work with financial institutions to talk to them about people being able to open up a bank account, for example, or we need to talk with the government about not penalizing people on social assistance for trying to save and deducting that money from their check. And so there's all of those pieces. And when we start talking about those things, it becomes advocacy. And I know that the United Church, I think, has run afoul of CRA around this as well, but particularly with the government that we have in place, doing that kind of work at more of a systemic level can put your charitable status in jeopardy, which can limit the resources that you have available to you to be able to do the work that you want to do. So that's another very real constraint. And then there's other work that, so for example, one thing that I've been personally very concerned about is what the government is doing in terms of immigration and refugee policy. I think they're taking us back decades. Both in terms of the policies that they're putting in place and the discourse around it, which I think is incredibly damaging. And I want to be able to scream out from the rafters, this is wrong and it should change. And I want my organization to be able to do that. But we're not in a position to do that for a whole variety of reasons. So there is the need to work creatively and to recognize that within the institutions that we're linked to, there are things that they can do very well, and there's other things that fall out of bounds, and we need to figure out other ways to be able to do that work. And then the last issue that I'll just touch on briefly is it's a very, very difficult one, and it applies both to the work that we do as an organization, but also when you're working with people at a very individual, personal level. And that is that when people have had very traumatic experiences, when they've been in a system that has been incredibly damaging and difficult, it causes there's a psychological cost that is associated with that, and there can be a lot of anger that is absolutely legitimate. But what happens is we're trying to accompany each other along this journey. That anger can be misplaced and unleashed on the people that are trying to be part of that journey. And I've certainly done that to people, and I've been the recipient of that kind of misplaced anger. And so the other piece is for us to know what the limits around that are and to place those limits. I think it's important to do that, and not to think that part of our role is to basically be a punching bag for people along that journey. And there's times when we need to say, you know what, I just can't accompany you right now because it's not working. It's not helpful for the person that you're walking beside, and it's certainly not doing you any favors. So again, getting back to work, I had to make a couple of phone calls last week to participants who've been interacting with staff in ways that were not respectful, because they were upset and angry about the bureaucratic hoops that we were having them jump through in order to access their assets. And they were upset about a whole bunch of other things, right, once I made the phone call. But at some point, we might decide to withdraw services because we can't continue working with folks. So in reflecting on all of this, I'd like to end with one of my favorite quotes, because I think all of us who are concerned about social justice have really high ideals and really want to embody these principles in the work that we do. And what I'd like to say is, in the world that we have right now, that's not possible to do all the time 100% perfectly. And I often repeat this Leonard Cohen quote to myself, which is, "Ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in."